Bey, as someone that appreciates American comic books and has been in Asia for a very long time, what's your take on DevaShard?
Well, I was just amazed at the number of different elements and influences that come together successfully. Because it's one thing to say we're going to connect 2 points, and it's another thing to actually make that connection work in terms of a story context, visually, in terms of narrative, in terms of an overall vision. To make that happen is really challenging. And there's been a lot of examples in the past of East and West not actually connecting. And I thought what DevaShard did, which was fascinating for me as somebody who's been primarily in Southeast Asia, in Hong Kong and China, to really, this is like my gateway, my portal into the Indian tradition and the, the Devas and the ancient stories and legends of India. I'm very familiar with the ones of China, but this was a great way, kind of like a cliff notes, to get into the Indian, that great tradition of Indian thought and of Indian imagination. And particularly, as somebody who's a Buddhist, having an interest in spiritual things as well. India is like the birthplace of so many of these traditions, the Hindu tradition, the Jains, the Buddhist tradition. And of course, what you're doing with DevaShard is kind of like, I would say, before all the isms. It's looking at what is the root ideas and truth. And I think to communicate that in the modern world in an interesting and dynamic way is really worth doing, because I think that in terms of human development, materially, technologically, physically is moving at great pace. Spiritually, I think things were probably better in the older times. And I think something like DevaShard is in a not preachy kind of way, is communicating some of these ideas and making people think about those ancient values in an exciting and new format. And so I think it's really commendable. And yet it works as entertainment. It works as a swashbuckling epic fantasy, if that's all you want it to be. But then when you actually read it, there is some substance to it as well. So I thought it was wonderful. And I think, and I've been traveling the world, and it's been fascinating to me. I was in London, and I was actually in a basement comic book store, geek that I am, on Charing Cross Road. And went in there, there's a big poster for DevaShard. So I really was impressed, having had my initial meetings when I met you guys here talking about various things and seeing the artwork and stuff, to going in to see that it had branched out and that the artwork and the comic book was available worldwide. So I think that's really, really great. And I think the team are really to be commended. The other thing is, it's really easy to have that quick explosion of energy when you first bring out a product, whether it's a TV series or it's a film series or a book series or comic book series. But to sustain it, that's probably the element no one ever talks about, the sheer stamina that you require to maintain a level of excellence. And from what I can see, that's what you guys are doing. And I admire that more than somebody who just has one brief, flurry of brilliant work and then can't sustain it over a period of time. I felt that it started strong and it stayed strong.
Do you think the artwork itself lives up to international standards?
I do. I think what's wonderful about it is actually you can take, sections of the book, and they wouldn't be out of place. And I think you guys are having some displays, but they wouldn't be out of place, if you kind of took that out and you put it into a gallery, and said this is a piece of art representing this culture and these ideas. There's some beautiful stuff in it. To me, more so than a lot of American comic books where, and I'm a big devotee of those, they're very much into probably narrative and action to the detriment of the environment and the costumes. And it's funny, it's like with movies. You only really notice things like sound and production design when they're not there. If you can't hear clearly, and if it looks cheap, you notice sound and production design. When they are there, you don't notice them. And I think that with looking at DevaShard, it's fascinating to see how much I noticed, or how much it was not a case of flashiness. It fitted with the story. But at the same time, you appreciated that this was something where there had been a due care and attention, the costuming and the period, and the world is a character in the book as much as the characters themselves. And it's a great accomplishment. We've seen we've seen a lot of characters, we've seen a lot of images over the years, and you see something like this, and it's just very powerful, very striking. And particularly as it's coming out of Hong Kong, and I'm very proud because like you guys, I'm a kind of transplanted foreign person coming to Hong Kong, tapping into the energy here in whatever way I can. You know, for me, it was more on the cinematic side. No one else, before this, of course, there was a long tradition of Cantonese, of Chinese comic books, and imported Japanese comic books. But to the best of my knowledge, this is the first indigenous Hong Kong produced book in English that's being distributed around the world. That's a major accomplishment. It's taken a while. We are 2008, the first one's out, so good for you.
Oh, thank you very much for your comments.
My pleasure. We'll keep on keeping on, and you know, I'll be there till the last issue. So good for you guys.
Thank you very much.
Double whammy thumbs up.